Welcome to paragraph 3.5 about the Netherlands reducing its CO2 emissions. How can we take care of the emission of CO2 in the Netherlands and how can we reduce this? Um, I would like to tell you about the following things. The reason why we do emit a lot of greenhouse gases. Um, I would like to show you what the actual Dutch policy is about the CO2 emission. Um, if we do have a policy for the future, what is it? What tells us about what we are going to do in the future? What are low CO2 energy supplies? Why does the landscape change with new energy supplies? And what are the biggest problems in the energy transition? First of all, why does the Netherlands emit a lot of greenhouse gases? Well, of course, the Netherlands has large areas of greenhouse horticulture, which are kossen in Dutch, and these are important for growing crops in the Netherlands during the winter and during the period of time when it's colder outside. Of course, this is not for use by ourselves, but it is for the export. And being a country which relies on export, these horticulture greenhouses are very important. On the other hand, we do have intensive livestock. That means that we do have a lot of animals um, on farms close to each other, and they emit, of course, greenhouse gases as well. And that is one of the biggest problems at this point in time. If you know what is happening in Dutch, this is the stikstofprobleem, and this problem is, of course, very important for all kind of plans that are being created nowadays, like building new houses, new roads, all kind of things. They have to check whether these projects are in conflict with the already high emission of greenhouse gases near those intensive livestock farms. On the other hand, we do have a big chemical industry in the Botlek area near Rotterdam, and this area is very important for the transition from, for example, crude oil into fuel for cars, for all kinds of uses, and as well for the export. So if you see what the part of the Netherlands is, or the goal for the Netherlands is in this whole process, is that we actually creating products which we can sell on again. So these are important for our economy. But that does mean that we do emit a lot of greenhouse gases by these projects, by all these things that we are doing. And of course, we do have the coal-operated power plants. They still exist. For example, in the northern part of the Netherlands, in Groningen, there was a new coal-operated power plant opened some years ago. Why, you should think? Because we do have wind power, we do have solar energy, but yes, they started with that just to be sure that there's enough electricity on the net, and of course because of the fact that we have to reduce the use of natural gas because of the earthquakes in Groningen. Yeah, that was one of the things that happened. But of course, the Netherlands does have a CO2 policy, and you can divide the energy that we are using in four uh, categories. So that means that there are what they call functionalities. How are we using the energy? And remember, the functionality is the purpose for which the energy is used. So energy can be used for heating your house, of course, but we can use it for something else as well. I would like to tell you what are these functionalities. At the first point, we have to look at power and light. So it means that we are using energy for, um, well, seeing something in the dark. I mean, if you are in your home and you can't turn on the lights because there aren't any, yeah, you won't use energy, of course, but we need those. And um, what is happening here is that something has to be changed in the network, the way the electricity network works. Because when it was designed, and that is quite a lot of decades ago, um, the whole network wasn't designed for bidirectional traffic and that are not cars, but that means that electricity is produced by solar panels at private owned houses. And what happens is when a solar panel creates power, creates energy, the energy is being transferred back into the net. And those nets, those traffic nets, are not created for that. So they have to change that. They have to adapt the network for being able to receive energy instead of just giving it. And of course, we can reduce CO2 emission by the energy production because of these solar panels. Because, of course, solar panels do not emit CO2, and that means that if we can use those solar panels to become the power source um, for more than one home, that means that we do have a new power plant which is CO2 free. Well, that should be a possibility. On the other hand, we do have high temperature heat, and that are, for example, um, the industry that uses heat for their production, like a company which creates steel. That means that you do need a high temperature which has to melt that iron. And of course, they use a lot of energy and create, with that in mind, a lot of CO2. For example, the Hoogovens, Tata Steel, IJmuiden, they are using coal and gas to create the heat they need to create the steel, of course. And what happens is that they have to do something with their CO2 emission. Um, so they have to reduce it by using different kinds of heating, or they have to capture the emissions and, well, afvangen is that what it's called in Dutch. And you have to save that CO2 somewhere else. You have to store it inside something which actually absorbs the CO2. On the other hand, we do have the low temperature heat, and that is an easy one. Then we're talking about privately owned homes, and we can use, of course, heat pumps because they don't use gas with electricity, and if that electricity has been created by turbines, by wind turbines, or by solar panels, it means that they are CO2 neutral. Of course, they are not CO2 neutral if we are using a coal-powered power plant, but okay, that is something which you have to think of as well. Um, and of course, the transport sector still uses a lot of fuel, but that is okay if you know that an electric vehicle can only drive about 300 kilometers on one charge, and it takes about, if you don't use a fast charger, about 12 hours to recharge it. That will cost a lot of money. So many of the transport organizations still use cars by with a fuel engine, a diesel engine. And well, what we can do is that we design those cars the way that they use less fuel, or they're not allowed anymore to drive that fast because the slower a car drives, the less fuel it consumes, of course. So there are all kind of things that are in that CO2 policy of the Netherlands, um, but they're designed in a way that they don't hurt the economy. The economy is very important for our country, and you see what happens. And what is then the future policy? Well, what they want, and this is something which is actually European, they want to reduce the CO2 emission by 49% in 2030. That means that they are comparing the CO2 emissions to 1990, that is the start year, and they see, okay, we want to get that reduction. And 20 years later, in 2050, they want to have a reduction of 95%. So that is okay. But the Netherlands even goes further. Our policy says that the Netherlands should become CO2 neutral in 2050. So at that point in time, we are not allowed anymore to emit more CO2 than we consume. So there has to be an equal balance. How can we do that? Well, just emit less CO2. How can we cover our energy needs without emitting CO2? Well, that's something difficult because we are with a lot of people in the Netherlands, so we all do have our devices, which of course use electricity, and we have to change that. How can we do that? By using wind energy, solar energy. Of course, geothermal heat is very important. We talked about that earlier. We can use the heat of our planet to warm our houses, but it's still very expensive. So if our government wants to reach the goals that they set up earlier, they have to think about how can we create a market which is interested in these kind of things. How can we interest people to invest in um, pretty expensive, because they are, um, machines that are able to extract that heat from the planet and use it in your home. Because nowadays we're still using gas to heat our homes, and of course there are some houses which already do have a heat pump. Water power, that can be used too. In the Netherlands there's a slight problem with that, because we do not have enough difference in height in the country, so that means that a dam is not an option, because our country will get flooded. We don't want that, of course. But we can use tidal energy, and that works the same way. We just put a generator into um, the end of the river, and seawater flows in and flows out, and water over the river flows in and flows out. So that means that the turbine will turn and it will generate energy. And the last one is the biomass. Yeah, that's a discussion point, because of the fact that biomass, of course, it contains CO2 when you're burning it. What's happening? They are actually working outside, and they cut down a tree, and that tree is being sliced into small particles, and those particles are being burned. And they say, well, it's CO2 neutral because that tree did use the CO2 to create oxygen. That's true, but over a lifespan of 50 years, and we are actually burning that tree down in about a day. So that means that all the CO2 that the tree collected in 50 years is being emitted into the atmosphere in a day. That's not right. But it is cleaner than using coal. And then there was a question: why is there, at all these clean energy sources, still CO2 emission? Because we have to produce these products. We have to create a wind turbine, a solar panel, a pump for the geothermal heat, and most of the time that energy comes out of fossil fuels. Yeah, and then there's another problem. Do we want that big generator in our backyard? Do we want that wind turbine nearby? So then we are talking about spatial planning and infrastructure. How can we emit less CO2? Of course, by introducing new energy sources like solar panels, or these smaller, of course, wind turbines. And in spatial planning, we can give all the industrial areas a new function, and that's called herstructuring, which is important, of course. And we can give these old industrial areas the possibility to develop themselves into an area which creates clean energy. But the problem is, most of the time, people are living around those areas and they don't want it there. And of course, there's another big problem. If you create a field of solar panels, it is not green anymore. And people tend to have problems with these kind of solar fields because they are ugly and they are reflecting the sunlight, and that sunlight is terrible for their eyes, some people think. Okay. In this case, it is very important that we have a policy about this. How many meters from a home are we allowed to build a wind generator? How many meters from a house are we able to install those solar panels? Are solar panels allowed on the front side of a house? Are the solar panels allowed on monuments? All these kind of things are in policy, and we are using them, and that means that it is difficult to create, for example, a field of solar panels, but we can do it if we have a good idea about it. We have to create a plan. And you see that I added two small snippets of an article which was posted last year, and they are of course in Dutch because it is happening in the Netherlands, and they are talking about the fact that Rijksbestuursteden did not want that wind energy and decided to stop with the intercommunal discussions. So that means that there were different cities talking together, discussing where should we place those wind generators, and those turbines weren't built there because Rijksbestuursteden did not want them, because they did not like them. And of course, there's something else. If you do have a power plant which runs on coal, you can put down the energy production. It means that it just works slower. But with a wind turbine, that is not possible. And with a solar panel, that is difficult as well. So how are we able to store all the energy that's produced by the new energy sources? And there are two ways to store that energy, by using battery packs or by using hydrogen. And battery packs, that is a problem. They are expensive and they contain scarce minerals from across of our planet, and they have to be taken out, and that emits CO2 again, of course, and it damages the surface of our planet. And we do have hydrogen, and hydrogen is an energy carrier, and the energy is actually manufactured elsewhere and saved in the hydrogen itself. But the problem is, if you want to create that hydrogen, it has to be changed the way it is. It is, of course, a gas, and that takes a lot of energy. So how are you going to do that? Of course, you can save the energy as well in a water reservoir if the water powers generators to retrieve the energy that was used to fill the artificial lake before. Yes, why not? Why don't we use that in the Netherlands? Because it is expensive. It's all about the money. So this is the end of our presentation for today. I do hope that you do have an idea how this works, and I hope that you can do something with it in the future or now.